Ekam Jagadbijamadyam Niriham Nirakaram Omkara Vedyam Yato Jayate Palyate Yena Vishvam Tamisham Bhaje Liyate Yatra Vishvam. Om. 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 I first of all thank the Vivekananda Study Circle of the JNU for having invited me to talk on this a very important subject of the secret of non-attachment. So on the surface, this subject seems to be something which has been discussed by many wise people in the past. And truly speaking, this is the central theme of the whole of the Sanatana Dharma scriptures. And we shall see how it is so. See, when we talk about non-attachment, before we enter into the subject of non-attachment, let us start with a very important teaching which Sri Shankaracharya gives in his Viveka Chudamani. You see, this non-attachment, to understand it in its proper sense, we have to go to the roots of this whole issue. Sri Shankara, in his Vivek Chudamani, right in the beginning, he makes a very beautiful statement. He says, Jantunam Nara Janma Durlabham. A very significant remark he makes there. Now, what does this mean? It means that among all the different bodies in which the soul can be born, the birth in the human body is Durlabham. Durlabham is the word used by Sri Shankara there. And it speaks a lot about what it means to be in the human body and what is the main purpose of having a birth in the human body. Now, what is the speciality of this human body? The speciality of this human body is that among all the bodies in this creation, it is only in the human body that the experience and the realization of the ultimate reality becomes possible. In no other body in this entire creation, this kind of an experience is possible. So, human body is that body in which a tremendous possibility is lying hidden. And that possibility is the attainment of freedom through knowledge. So, according to Vedanta, we should keep one thing very clearly in our mind. The Vedanta says the goal of human life is mukti, freedom, moksha. It is only from this angle the mystery of non-attachment and attachment will become clear. If we don't keep this ideal of mukti in front of us, we won't be able to understand the dynamics of this tremendous force or a tremendous phenomenon called attachment. If you look at it purely from the worldly standpoint, you will see that we have no solution to the problem of attachment. So, in order to understand this issue of attachment, we have to have this highest ideal kept before us by the great rishis of the past. And that ideal is that this human birth is essentially, and it is meant for the attainment of mukti and mukti alone. Sri Shankara further goes there and he states that labdhva kathamchit narajanma durlabham tatrapi punstam shruti yastu atma muktau na yateta mudhadhi sa hyatmaha swam vinihanti asadgrahat. It means, having attained this birth in a human body, if somebody is not striving to attain this mukti, this freedom, that person is committing a suicide. It is suicidal. Kenopanishad says that if this great attainment is made while living in this body, that's a big achievement. And if this attainment is not made, that is going to lead to great destruction. These are the words of Kenopanishad. So we have to understand that essentially the human birth is meant for the attainment of mukti. Now, what is the way to attain this mukti? The way to attain this mukti is through yoga. A beautiful word. Yoga essentially in Sanskrit means union with that ultimate reality. But in Bhagavad Gita, this yoga word has also been described in a slightly different manner. And that's a very beautiful description, a definition of yoga, which we find in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, Tam vidya dukkha sanyoga yoga, dukkha sanyoga viyoga samyitam. That is yoga. What is that? Gita says, Tam vidya dukkha sanyoga viyoga yoga samvitam. What does it mean? It means, a beautiful term comes there, dukkha sanyoga. Dukkha sanyoga means getting connected with dukkha. Now, to break this connection, dukkha sanyoga viyoga. Sanyoga is to get connected, and viyoga is to get disconnected. So Gita says, one of the beautiful definitions Gita says, that we are connected with dukkha. To break this connection, to bring about viyoga, is yoga. It's a beautiful description. So when we talk about dukkha sanyoga, our connection with dukkha, misery and suffering, what brings about this connection with dukkha? And if you go into the details, or rather the depths of human experience, we will find that the immediate cause of all the miseries, or the immediate cause which actually connects us with misery, is attachment. Now we are entering into the mystery of attachment. Let us first try to understand what attachment is before going into understand the secret of non-attachment. So as I said, Gita talks about dukkha sanyoga, our connection with dukkha. And to break this connection, the process of breaking this connection with dukkha is yoga. And that yoga has to be practiced. Krishna says, it has to be practiced. A certain kind of life has to be led. Then only this dukkha sanyoga turns into viyoga. We can break this connection with misery. So as I said, it is through the cord of attachment. Attachment is that cord, that rope which ties us or connects us with dukkha. If this cord of attachment is snapped, our connection with dukkha is gone. We should understand In human life, all the misery, whenever we have suffered, it is owing to this great, I should say, this very inscrutable kind of a thing which is called as attachment. It is owing to attachment we suffer. If attachment is given up, our connection with suffering also ends. So, in this context, a beautiful analogy comes to my mind, which Sri Ramakrishna, in his gospel, he mentions this. Sri Ramakrishna says, there was a kite, and this kite was very hungry, and it was looking for its prey, its food, and luckily it could catch a live fish from a lake, a big fish, very living, still it is not dead, and the kite holds that fish in its beak and flies. The fish is still living, it's not dead. You can understand what a tempting thing it is for the kite. The kite is deeply attached to this object, which is going to give tremendous pleasure to it. So this kite is flying with this object called fish, and it is deeply attached to it. And when the kite takes off with this fish in its beak, a mob of crows, a horde of crows begin to follow this kite. And you know how crows, how nagging and how troublesome it can be. We have seen, often we see. So this mob of crows we find chasing this kite. In whichever direction this kite is trying to escape, this mob of crows, this horde of crows follows it and makes it miserable. At last, after moving around in different directions, this kite finally, what it does is that it drops that fish from its beak. The moment the fish is dropped from its beak, this mob of crows which was following this kite, in whichever direction it was going, this crows then leaves this kite, and this kite very peacefully goes and sits on a branch and then rests forever. Sri Ramakrishna gives this example, a beautiful example. Now, say in this example, we should understand everything is the symbology. This kite is the human being, and the fish is an object, but here fish can be taken as attachment. As long as this attachment to this object was there, the kite was chased by the crows. The moment this attachment was dropped, all those mob of crows left the kite. You see, this is exactly what happens in human life. As long as we have attachment, this mob of misery and suffering, which is actually the crows in this symbology, that misery and suffering will keep on following us and we have no escape from it. But the moment we give up attachment in life, you will see that this wind of misery and suffering coming from all sides, it completely leaves us. Then this world has got no power to hold us and make us suffer. It is through this attachment that this world which we are experiencing, again I repeat, it is through attachment that this world which we are experiencing has got the power to influence us and make us miserable. If we don't have this attachment, this world has got no power to make the person miserable and suffer. So this is the connection between human suffering and attachment. So the immediate cause of human suffering, we may say, is attachment. Again, I repeat, the immediate cause of human suffering can be said to be attachment. But the root cause, from where does this attachment spring? That is the important point. What is that root cause? Unless we go to the root, this attachment cannot be uprooted. So there is a need for us to go to the roots. So what is the root? What is this genesis of this phenomenon called attachment? Let us try to understand that. You see, in Vedanta comes a very beautiful picturization of our state of existence. And one of the beautiful depictions of our state of existence as we are is found in Sri Shankaracharya's magnanimous piece of writing, which is known as Adhyaksha, which tells us precisely how we have come to be in a state in which we find ourselves to be. There he states, of course, this is all based upon the main principles of the Upanishad, but Sri Shankara has put it so succinctly, so clearly, that it is simply brilliant. There are two things. If we just examine ourselves and the world which we are experiencing, we should understand there are two things. One is Chaitanya. Now, Chaitanya is just a word. Though we are that, we are presently not experiencing it. That is one thing. Chaitanya is also called as Atman or Brahman. These are the words all of you must be familiar with. This Chaitanya or consciousness, we can say, these are all terms, English terms, terms which are somewhat proximate to what exactly it means. English terms are always not sufficient or it is not enough to express what exactly these Sanskrit terms connote. But still we have to, as this class is going on in English, we have to use these terms. So we can say it's consciousness. So on one side we have this pure consciousness with this Chaitanya, which is known as Atman. And the other side we have Jada. Jada means that which is opposed to consciousness, which is matter, material, or that which is Anatma. So Chaitanya is the Atman and the Jada is the Anatman. Now, Shankaracharya says, or Vedanta says, Upanishad also says, that these two things, truly speaking, they can never mix up. They can never mingle. The Chaitanya can never become Jada, and the Jada can never become Chaitanya. But Sri Shankara very beautifully says, I'm not going into the detail of the Adhyaksha Bhashya, but I'm just giving the outline. So though this Chaitanya and the Jada can never mix up, they cannot mix to become one entity, yet in our life we find that this Chaitanya has started understanding itself to be Jada. It has mixed up with the Jada. Now this is the predicament. The moment the Chaitanya begins to understand itself to be the Jada, what happens is that infinite Chaitanya, limitless, which is complete, which is Purna, that Purna Chaitanya, because of its association with Jada, it begins to think itself to be limited. This is the first outcome. The infinite Brahman appears to become a Jiva, what we are. So we are actually speaking Chit Jada Granthi, the mixture of Chaitanya and Jada. The infinite Brahman, through its association with a small piece of matter, it has come to believe that it is a small individual. The infinite appears to have become limited. And the moment it appears to have become limited, now a mistaken identity has emerged. This mistaken identity is the sense of I. I am a man. I am a woman. I am Mr. So and so. I am Mrs. So and so. This identity comes. It is Brahman, nothing short of Brahman. The infinite Purna Brahman, owing to the strange power of Maya, it considers itself to be a Jiva. And from then, because now it is experiencing itself to be incomplete, it suffers from an existential problem of incompleteness, apurnata. We are all experiencing this apurnata, and that is why the entire creation is restless. Why is this creation restless? Everybody is struggling to go back to its state of purnata, completeness. So the struggle is going on to become complete. The only thing is that we don't know in which direction to struggle. And then because of this sense of incompleteness, we then have desire. We desire different objects of this creation with the belief that these objects, when experienced, it will make me complete. So all this struggle or all this restlessness which we see in the creation, human beings, animals, everybody is involved in that. It is all the struggle of that living creature to become complete, but it takes the form of one person or one creature running after the different objects of the world. All is the basic instinctual struggle to become complete, but the direction is wrong. Now, in this way, the infinite experiences incompleteness, limitedness, then it desires. Through desires, it works to get something, and it gets attached to those things which gives it pleasure. Now, this is the genesis of attachment. Attachment, the root of attachment lies in the mistaken identity of all of us. This mistaken identity is from where the whole problem starts. Vedanta puts it in a simple way: avidya, kama, karma. The root is avidya, ignorance about one's own true nature, which causes one to feel that I am incomplete. And because of this incompleteness, we have desire, we begin to work, we begin to act with selfishness and with attachment, and we get bound and we become miserable. So this is the series of events which is happening in every jiva's life. Now let me give a small example in this case. Then it will become more clear perhaps. Just imagine there is an ocean, an infinite ocean. The ocean here stands for the Brahman, which is complete. Ocean is Purna. Somehow, owing to a strange power called Maya, if this ocean begins to think that it is a small wave, just imagine what a predicament it is. The infinite ocean, which is complete in itself, which is Purna, which doesn't need anything, that infinite ocean now, owing to a strange Maya, if it begins to think that it is a small wave, what a miserable thing it is. So first of all, there is a mistaken identity. The ocean begins to think that it is a small wave. The infinite now has become finite. The limitless appears to have become limited. Now, once this ocean considers itself to be a small wave, now this small wave, taking itself to be really a small wave, begins to chase other waves. It wants to grab every other wave, thinking that by grabbing and clinging to the other waves, it will become complete. And this grabbing, this selfish grabbing, and this selfish clinging, this selfish striving to possess the other waves, this is what takes the form of attachment. This is the miserable state in which that ocean exists in this Vyavaharika world. So this is precisely what happens with all of us. Now, you see how the genesis of this attachment is in a mistaken identity. We do not know what is our true identity. From there starts this whole series of different events, which finally comes to this phenomenon called attachment, which connects us with misery. Another very important thing which we have to understand about attachment is that this attachment in our society, it camouflages as love. This is the most dangerous thing which happens in human society. Here I'm trying to compare these two things. Let us try to understand the difference between love and attachment. It is this attachment which insinuates itself as love in human society. In human society, Swami Vivekananda in his complete works, he says, very harsh words he uses there in one of his talks. I cannot recollect the exact wordings, but its words are very harsh. He says 99% of the human beings, they are all moved by the force of attachment. Where is love? Where is love? It's all attachment. But it appears to be love. I will make this point more clear. What is love and what is attachment? You see, love is the sense of oneness. Love is the sense of oneness with all, without selfish clinging to anything. Again, I repeat, love is a sense of oneness with all, without any selfishness in it, and without the tendency to cling to any particular thing, without the tendency to possess a particular thing. It is a sense of oneness with all. This all includes everything, not only human beings, even the animals, all the creatures, all the inanimate objects as well, the entire creation. Again, I repeat this point because this is very vital. Actually speaking, love, what is love, cannot be defined. It cannot be described. It cannot be put in words, because love means the ultimate reality. And the ultimate reality and love, they are two sides of the same coin. Just like Brahman is indescribable, love is also indescribable. It can be experienced, but to describe it, to put it in words, is impossible. But still, as human beings, as these words are the one instrument which we have, through which we can communicate certain ideas, we can struggle to proximately make the other person understand what this phenomenon of love is. Again, I repeat, love is the sense of oneness with all, with absolutely no place for selfishness, clinging, and a sense of possessiveness to a particular thing. Now, opposed to this, what we find is attachment. Attachment works through a sense of separateness. Love works in a sense of oneness. Attachment works with a sense of separateness. I am separate and that object is separate. That person is separate. So attachment works through a sense of separateness, expressing itself in the form of selfish clinging to things and people around. Attachment works through the sense of separateness, expressing itself through selfish clinging to things around. Not only selfish clinging, but also a sense of possessiveness. This is a vital difference between love and attachment. But it is this attachment which camouflages itself in the form of love in society. Everybody talks of love, love, love. I love you, I love you. We know this is the most common terms which we come across in the human society. But who understands love? It is only the knower of Brahman understands what love is. Because love is the expression of Brahman. Love is the expression of the Atman. Attachment is the expression of the body-mind complex. From this body-mind complex, from this jiva, only attachment can spring. And from Atman, from Brahman, only love can spring. What emerges from this body-mind complex, what emerges from jiva is attachment. What comes from God, what comes from Brahman, what comes from Atman consciousness is love. Now, how many people have got love in society? Love can come only when our Atman consciousness is awakened. As long as our Jiva consciousness is there, as long as I consider myself to be the limited individual, and I am very sure about it, my convictions are very strong that I am the Jiva. In that situation, what can come out of that system, that body-mind complex, is only attachment. Because it will try to shower its affection only on a chosen few. It's all genetics, it's all biology, it's all chemistry. Attachment works between one individual and a few individuals around us through a sense of I and mine. This is very important. I and mine. How am I connected to the things around me? To the sense of mine, this mineness, and behind the sense of mineness is a selfish attitude. It takes the form of affection, but that affection is selfish. Somewhere deep within, the element of selfishness is very clearly present there, and a sense of possessiveness is present there. And this affection is limited. This is another characteristic of attachment. This affection which one person has for the other, it becomes attachment. Why? Because it is limited to one or two individuals. You know, we all have that wonderful thing that every family we find, every parents, mothers, we are all connected with our children. And we have all the sense of me and mine, I and mine. So because of this limitedness of this affection, you see, whenever such people pray, there's an element of selfishness even in that prayer also. Suddenly I'm reminded of Swami Ranganathanandaji, the 13th president of the Ramakrishna order. He very beautifully states in one of his talks, he says that how do people, such selfish people, or people who have their affinity or affiliations only to a few people around them, genetically connected. This is what is attachment actually. So he says, such people, how would they pray? They would say, "O God, save me and my wife, my son and his wife, we four and no more." So very beautifully this, though he might have spoken this in a lighter vein, but it conveys a great truth that this me and mine, oh God, save me and my wife, my son and his wife. we four and no more. This is attachment. Whereas when love emerges, that person's affection is not circumscribed or limited to a few individuals. Love encompasses the entire creation because love is God itself. Love is Atman itself. Love is Brahman itself. That person's affection is not limited to one individual, two individual. There is no element of selfishness in it. He doesn't expect anything from anybody. There is no sense of possessiveness in that. And that love knows no limits, no boundaries. Let us take one example. This is a very, very subtle and very difficult subject to make somebody understand the distinction between love and attachment. But it will become more clear through a very striking example. Just look into, first of all, I should say that all the mothers, with all due reverence, mother is the most adorable living being in this world. As far as the human family is concerned, all the creatures are concerned. Mother is the most adorable being. We all know that. But in spite of that, even the mother's relationship with its progeny, its children, is nothing but attachment. It will be slightly hurting and offensive for us to hear this, but this is a plain fact. Now, this will become clear if I give an example. What is the difference between the ordinary mother, which, not only mother actually, mother, father, I include everybody. It's not the question of only being mother, but mother I am taking because mother is the most adorable and worshipable living being in our lives. We all know that. But seen from the higher standpoint, even that affection is actually nothing but attachment. It is genetic. How? You see, what is the difference between the affection which we find in a mother in this world and the mother whom we call Sri Sharada Devi, the Holy Mother? Do we find any difference between Sharada Devi's affection? She is also mother, not genetically, but she is the mother of all. Do the ordinary mothers in the world have that kind of affection which Sharada Devi had? You see, Sharada Devi's love or affection, Sharada Devi's love is the true love. In other cases, in the ordinary mothers and fathers, what goes out of them, the affection, is actually speaking is an attachment. How? The affection coming from the so-called mothers and fathers and other husbands and wives and everything, you can include everything, all these relationships. In that affection is limited to a few beings around us who are related to us genetically. Our affection doesn't cross the boundaries of our genetic relationship. Number one. Number two, there is an element of selfishness in it. How much ever we may try to deny it, but there is a subtle element of selfishness even in the relationship between mother and child. This none can deny. Then there is a sense of possessiveness. Then this affection is limited. These are the characteristics of attachment. Whereas what do we find in Sri Sharada Devi's life, Holy Mother's life? Her affection, is it limited? No. She showers all her affection on anybody who comes close to her, but is her affection limited to that person? No. Secondly, does she expect anything in return for the affection which she showers on that human being? Absolutely no selfishness. Number three, Is there any sense of possessiveness about that object on which she is showering her affection? Any sense of possessiveness? No. This love, where there is no sense of possessiveness, there is no element of selfishness, there is no limits to its range. This affection is love. And this affection comes from God consciousness, because God is all pervading, and God expressing in the form of affection, that affection she showered on all the things of this creation equally. That is love. Love is universal. Love takes us to freedom. Attachment binds us. So again, I want to tell that love emerges from God consciousness. Love emerges from Atman consciousness, whereas attachment comes from the body consciousness, this body identity. From this body-mind identity, only attachment can emerge, whereas from Atman, from Brahman, from God alone, love can emerge. Now, these are some of the very intricate points which we have discussed till now. Now, one more thing which we need to understand when we discuss this topic of non-attachment, which is very important. And that thing is our life as it is conducted in human society. You will see that it is based upon some dangerous presumptions. I would like to touch upon this point because it is very vital in understanding this phenomenon of attachment. What are these dangerous presumptions? Swami Vivekananda mentions this in his Karma Yoga. Two basic presumptions which we all actually are governed by. Number one, whenever we do something for someone, parents doing something for their children, or a rich man doing something for the poor, or one person trying to help, we have a presumption. I say again, it's a presumption. The presumption is that we are helping the world. We are helping the other person. You should first of all understand this world doesn't need the help of you and me. This is the first basic thing we have to be very clear in my mind. The world is not waiting for it to be helped by you and me. In short, the world does not need us. We have a sense of an exaggerated sense of self-importance. All of us have. We think that without me, the other person cannot survive. The parents think that without me, without us, how can our children survive? What will happen to the children? So we also have a second presumption that the world is dependent on us. Some human beings are dependent on us. The parents think that the children are dependent on us. This Swami Vivekananda, this Karma Yoga, he says, this is nothing but sheer pride, selfishness, and attachment. It is arrogant to think that somebody is dependent on me. Who am I, or who are you, or who is anyone in this creation to think that somebody is dependent on us? And with this attitude, we do something to that person. And we think that we are doing a great favor to that person. This is all the expression of nothing but that cord of attachment. Just imagine if this very moment, maybe 5 minutes later, if I die, or if you, any one of you, death can come to anybody at any point of time. I ask this question. If we die in 5 minutes, is it going to make any difference to anybody in this creation? Is the world going to stop for us to come back? Is anything going to stop? Is the kitchen in the house going to stop? Nothing stops. Everything will be conducted in its own usual manner, whether we exist or not. So, first thing we should understand to snap this disease of attachment is that the world doesn't need us. Then, what is the role that we have to play here? That is the next question then. The world doesn't need us. The world is not dependent on us. And whatever we are doing to the world, we are nobody to help the world. The world doesn't need our help at all. So these are the basic presumptions which actually is the expression of this disease called attachment. Because we are very strongly attached to the things of the world, these things come and it expresses in life. So we need to understand that, of course, a story comes to my mind, but already the time is. Let me just tell that story. That will be very interesting also. There was a great spiritual personality called Sridhar Swami. Many of you might have heard his story. The Sridhar Swami is the person who wrote a commentary on Bhagavad Gita, a beautiful commentary which we studied even in the training center when we were at Belur Math. So Sridhar Swami, in his life, this incident takes place. See, we all think that others are dependent on us. The parents think that the children are dependent on us. But we should understand this entire creation is being protected and nourished by not you and me, but by a divine power. If somebody is destined to live, whether I help that person or not, that person will live. And if that person is not destined to live, whether I am present close to him or not, that person won't be able to survive beyond the allotted life. This is the simple law of life. Sridhar Swami's life, what happened? He was a great spiritual person and he had a burning desire to take sannyasa. He was a married man. So his wife, she was pregnant and she delivered a baby. And at the time of delivering the baby, the wife died. And that small newborn baby was just lying next to Sridhar Swami. The wife's cremation was going on, it is said. And the baby was just lying next to him. The wife is dead. The newborn baby is here. And Sridhar Swami was burning with the fire of renunciation. He wanted to take sannyas because he was a sadhaka. He understood the mystery of this life and creation. And he understood that the main purpose of human life is to realize God. So in that state of mind, he was having this dilemma. How can I leave this baby and go? This baby is dependent on me. This was his dilemma. Just then, it is said that the egg of an insect fell from the roof beneath which he was sitting, and that egg hatched. And from that hatched egg, a small insect came out. And the moment the small insect came out, another lizard which was just close by, that lizard came and ate the small insect which came out of that broken egg. Seeing this whole arrangement, it immediately enlightened the mind of Sridhar Swami. Sridhar Swami understood. In this creation, every creature is provided. The food for every creature is provided by the divine providence itself. That insect which came out of the broken egg was the food of this lizard. And then you can go on. The lizard itself is the food for some other creature. And the whole food chain is working by strange divine providence. Do you think that somebody needs our protection? Immediately Sridhar Swami left the place and he went and embraced sannyasa, leaving the child there. If the child is destined to be surviving and alive, It will survive. Somebody else will come, become an instrument to become the child's protector and nourisher, whether Sridhar Swami is there or not. So this is what is a beautiful story. So we should understand that nobody is dependent on us. The world doesn't need us. The world is not waiting for it to be held by us. These are the dangerous presumptions, which actually is the outcome, or rather, the beneath this is the phenomenon called attachment. Now, coming to the secret of non-attachment. Now, what is the secret of non-attachment? As I said before, the root of this problem of attachment is our mistaken identity that I am so and so, Mr. So and so, or Mrs. So and so. So, the root of this problem of attachment is ignorance. We have to do away with this ignorance and we have to gain self knowledge. So, Gyan or knowledge is the one way to overcome this problem of attachment or to attain non attachment. The other method is through love. So, the path of knowledge, in the path of knowledge, you understand that you are the Atman. When you awaken your Atman consciousness, you attain non attachment. And through the path of love or devotion, we can say that when you awaken God consciousness, then also you can attain this non attachment. As I said before, our attitude behind the work, when we do something for somebody, when the parents are doing something for the children, when husband is doing something for the wife, if the attitude is that the wife is dependent on me, and I am helping the wife, these are all wrong attitudes. These are all the outcome of nothing but attachment. So what should be the right attitude? The right attitude is the attitude of worship. Swami Vivekananda says, when we bring in the attitude of worship, why worship? If you just look at it from the highest reality, everybody is nothing but Brahman. Everybody is nothing but Atman. Everybody is nothing but one with God. The wife is also one with God. The children are one with God. And God is present in every single entity in this creation. With this attitude, whatever you do it in a spirit of worship. Not that you are helping somebody. Not that that person is dependent on you. That person is dependent on God and God alone. So this worshipful attitude also is a way to attain non-attachment. Another very beautiful point which Swami Vivekananda talks about in the Karma Yoga. Arpita, I hope I can take 5 more minutes.
Yes, sure, Maharaj.
Just 5 more minutes and I'll just wind up my talk.
Yes, Maharaj.
Yes. So Swami Vivekananda in his Karma Yoga says, the secret of non-attachment is complete self-abnegation. What does this complete self-abnegation mean? This complete wiping out of this small individuality. As I said, it is from the small individuality that attachment springs. The small individuality, the small sense of I, this I has to be completely wiped out. That is the secret of non-attachment. So complete self-abnegation. So that self-abnegation can come when we have this attitude of worship towards everything. When you worshipfully when you act, you totally forget yourself. This forgetting your small identity is a way to overcome the problem of attachment. Then you can attain non-attachment. It is through attachment that the world binds us. Again, I repeat, it is through attachment. It is through the cord of attachment. At the beginning of this class, I said, attachment is that cord which ties us down to the world, and the world rules us. Who is free here? Nobody is free. The richest man in this world and the poorest man sleeping on the street, as long as attachment is there, that person is a slave. The person is bound. And if you snap this cord of attachment, if we bring non attachment, the world loses its capacity to govern us. Then alone we become free. And that freedom is attained through love, through knowledge. The secret is love and knowledge. The secret of attaining non attachment is love and knowledge. And what is love? I have already described it before. Sri Ramakrishna beautifully gives us the secret of this non attachment. When somebody asked Sri Ramakrishna, "Okay, Thakur, how are we going to live in this world?" Sri Ramakrishna says, "Live in this world like a maid servant working in a rich man's house." One of the beautiful, most practical, down to earth, precise prescription for the problem of attachment. Most beautiful, I would say. How practical it is. Sri Ramakrishna says one should lead the life just like a maid servant working in a rich man. Look at the maid servant. She is busy with that rich man's household. She is taking care of the rich man's children. She is looking into all the affairs of the rich man as if she is deeply attached and involved in it. But actually speaking, she is not at all attached. Why, even while working for the rich man, she knows that this is not my house and these people are not my people, my relatives, they are staying in my house. So with this attitude, she works. Next day, if the rich man says that from tomorrow you don't have to come, she has got no problem at all. Immediately she leaves and she packs her bag and she leaves. This is non-attachment. Similarly, Sri Ramakrishna says, in this world, this is a stranger's land. None belongs to us. We are here only to attain self-knowledge. That is the only purpose of the human existence in this world. There's no other purpose. Fathers and mothers and children and husbands and wives, there is no other purpose. This is a gymnasium, as Swami Vivekananda says. We are becoming stronger and stronger by becoming non-attached. That's all. The more and more we are attached, we are weaker and weaker. So this is that gymnasium in which we are working out every day to become stronger and stronger by cultivating non-attachment and leaving the scene and go away. Go away to our true abode. The true abode is Atman and Brahman. So that is Sri Ramakrishna's beautiful prescription. He says, live in the world like a maidservant living in the rich man's house. One more thing, final thing. Now, from where is this self-knowledge or this God consciousness or this love, universal love going to come? From where is this non-attachment going to come? Sri Shankaracharya makes a beautiful observation. He says, Nissangatve, Satsangatve Nissangatvam, Nissangatve Nirmohatvam, Nirmohatve Nishchalatatvam, Nishchalatatve Jivan Mukti. Beautiful. Satsangatve Nissangatvam. This Nissangatvam. Nissangatvam means non-attachment. This non-attachment, from where is it going to come? What is the way to attain it? Shankaracharya says, Satsang, Sadhu-sang. In Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, whenever a devotee has asked Thakur, what is the way? Sri Ramakrishna has invariably said, the way is Satsang. The company of serious spiritual aspirants. So the company really matters. When we are in the company of serious spiritual practitioners who are practicing non-attachment, that is the best way for us to cultivate this great quality of non-attachment. So once again I thank the Vivekananda Study Circle of JNU for having given me this opportunity to share my ideas on this very important subject on non-attachment. And I pray that may God fill our minds with Viveka, Vairagya, Bhakti, and Gyan, and make our minds free from the disease of attachment and make us fully non attached. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maharaj. We do have a few questions, if I might pose them to you.
Yeah, yes.
So I'll save my question for last. But Alka asked, non-attachment. It sounds to me like something I want to avoid. If it is, then is non-attachment healthy or unhealthy? Because, for example, babies need to feel attached to their mothers and fathers, as psychologists tell us. Having a healthy attachment to a spouse or friend can result in a much happier and more peaceful marriage.
See, is it really a fact that attachment makes the marital relationship truly happy? I seriously speaking, I doubt. If that had been the case, the whole world would have been the happiest place. But that's not the case actually. See, as I said in the beginning, we cannot understand the mystery of attachment only by looking at it from the worldly perspective. Unless we keep the high ideal before us, the ideal of the true nature of the man, we won't understand what really brings us happiness. Now, this also, see, you touched upon two things. You have connected attachment to happiness in your question. The children's attachment with the parents and the husband's attachment with the wife and all those things which brings happiness. But is it really a fact that it brings happiness? Remember, wherever there is selfishness, wherever there is a sense of possessiveness, it cannot bring us happiness. The moment there is selfishness in our affection, of course, see, you have to think for yourself whether the affection which we are showering on the other person, whether it is really free from all selfish calculations. This is a big question which I don't want to answer. I leave it to the audience to think for himself or herself whether our affection is completely selfless. And the moment selfishness is present, it will only bring misery. This is an incontrovertible principle of life. Had it not been so, everybody would have been happy in this world. But it's not so. The parents who are attached to their children, we know how the children make their parents literally dance to their tunes. Parents want the children to do what they want. Parents always try to hold on to the children, possess them. A sense of possessiveness is there in all these relationships, and it only amounts to the reaction of misery and suffering. So the other way of looking at this issue is, instead of looking at the other person as somebody who is genetically connected to me, as I said, the secret lies in love, which is different from attachment. This love comes from God consciousness or reality consciousness. So there's absolutely no problem in having wives and children and other relatives. The whole problem is the problem of the way we look at them. That is what actually is going to make the difference. It is the drishti. If we have the worldly drishti, jiva drishti, let me use the word jiva drishti. As long as we have the jiva drishti towards the other person, remember, whatever will happen, it will be all happening through attachment, which will bring misery and misery alone. Through Jiva Drishti, this alone is going to happen. Now, bring Ishvara Drishti, Brahma Drishti. Brahma Drishti is what? Yeah. The child is there, it is Brahman. Husband is there, he is Brahman. The wife is there, he is Brahman. He is adorable, he is worshipable. Whatever you do, you are actually worshipping the Lord in and through your actions. Now, there is no suffering. Suffering cannot come from this then. But this is love actually. So we need to move from our limited affections, which is rooted in selfishness, which is rooted in a sense of possessiveness, to an affection which knows no limits, which is not limited, which is not possessive, and which doesn't have the element of selfishness. Now, this is what actually is the secret of happiness. So, this I leave it. You have to think about it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Maharaji.
Second question is from Nilanjan, who asks, how can sadhaks notice their own asangatvam as the Atman counteracting past samskaras which encourage attachment?
Can you please repeat that question? It was not clear to me.
Sure, one more time. How can sadhaks notice their own asangatvam as the Atman counteracting past samskaras which encourage attachment?
Oh, yes, interesting. It's a struggle between attachment and non attachment. And this questioner has very beautifully put that Atman's asangatvam. Fantastic thing he has told. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says, Asango hi ayam purushaha, Asango hi ayam atma. This Atma is by its very nature asanga, non-attached. Now see, this is the predicament. We are actually the Atman, and when we are talking about the secret of non-attachment, there is no non-attachment apart from Atman consciousness, because Atman alone is non-attached. Asango hi ayam atma, asango hi ayam purushaha. This Purusha means not this human being. Huh? Purusha means Atman, Brahman. Brahman alone is unattached. So, the struggle between attachment and non-attachment which ensues in the sadhaka's life can be won. The struggle can be put to an end only by awakening the Atman consciousness. By constantly struggling to awaken this Atman consciousness, because Atman alone is by its very nature non-attached. It is by that way we can overcome the samskaras of attachment. The questioner says, there is the samskaras of attachment. Very true. Wonderful question. Yes, the old samskaras, how many lives we have lived with this cord of attachment actually governing our actions. And there's heap of samskaras. And samskaras is nothing but it turns out to be a habit. We are habitually working in a certain way governed by the force of attachment. Now to break this, what is the way? The way is abhyas. Abhyas means practice. Constantly. Now that is why I said the way is satsang. Being the company of seriously spiritually minded people who are already on the path of non-attachment. By being in the company of such people, we who are governed by the samskaras of attachment, we can slowly raise ourselves from attachment to non-attachment, because the influence of spiritual people is unmistakable. It is unmistakable. Sadhu Sangha is the best medicine for this disease of worldliness. You should remember. Just imagine if somebody is fortunate enough to live in the company of is Sri Ramakrishna. Somebody is fortunate to live in the company of Swami Vivekananda. Somebody is fortunate to live in the company of Sri Shankaracharya. What more is needed? Their life is a blazing demonstration of non attachment, and that very strongly influences the sadhakas who are living close to them. So, the satsang is the way in which the person who is struggling with his samskaras of attachment can overcome attachment and attain non attachment.
Forgive me, that was from, the question was from Srinivas Yuvan.
Yeah.
Next question is from Arpita. At the beginning, you said, Maharaj, that so long as we are worldly, non-attachment will not be possible. So, can we define non-attachment as attachment to God?
Yes, non attachment is attachment to God. That's true. No, I would not say non attachment is attachment to God. Yes, it's a way of putting it. Rather, I would say God and non attachment are the two sides of the same coin. Atman, you say God or you say Atman or you say Brahman, doesn't matter. It is the same reality. What I want to say is that complete ultimate reality and non attachment, they go together. So, while leading our life, our whole struggle to overcome attachment can become successful by awakening our God consciousness, because God consciousness and non attachment are the two names of the same thing. Because God alone is non attached, Atman alone is non attached, Brahman alone is non attached. So, when we awaken the Brahman consciousness or God consciousness, that is the way to overcome the problem of attachment. Again, I say, see, try to understand attachment springs from the individual consciousness, the Jiva consciousness. So, we have to overcome this Jiva consciousness and realize our Brahman consciousness. Again, I say, attachment springs from the Jiva consciousness, that is the root. This root has to be plugged, and the true Brahman consciousness has to be awakened. When that happens, or in the process of that, we slowly become less and less attached and we grow in non attachment. So it's a process, it's a long drawn process. It is not something which is going to happen all of a sudden. A lot of abhyasa, practice is involved in that. In fact, that is what is yoga. Dukkha sanyoga viyoga, yoga. To break the connection with dukkha is yoga, and to break the connection with dukkha, we have to break this cord of attachment by practicing the awakening of Atman consciousness. That is the way.
So I'll ask my question next. I don't live in India, and I was reminded as you were speaking, Maharaj, of duty and doing our duty. And we talked a little bit last week about doing our duty, but doing so without attachment. This sense that we should be doing our duty, but not thinking that we are doing our duty at the same time. So the question for me is, Swamiji says that environments change the nature of our duties. And so I guess my question is, how do we discriminate what our duty is when we live in a different nation, for example, where customs become so different and the sense of duty becomes obscured sometimes? Do we act as Hindus? But then again, Hinduism says that all paths lead to God at the same time. So that is my question.
See, again, the idea of duty, this is something which has got roots in this Jiva consciousness. Remember, duty is not the ultimate thing of the human life. Or rather, I would like to say is that the ultimate duty of the human being, as I said right in the beginning, see, yes, every society has got its own customs, and the duty changes with the changing of circumstances, with the change of society in which we are living, a certain race in which certain things are considered to be dutiful, that same thing will not be considered to be dutiful in some other race or some other society. Yes, all these differentiations are there. This is the very nature of this world, where as the situation changes, our customs change and our practices change and our way of interacting with others also, the value system also changes upon these situations. But whatever may the society in which we are living, to whichever race we may be belonging, we should remember one thing: the ultimate param purushartha, the supreme duty of the human being. If that is kept in view, that will make you understand what you have to do in a certain situation, in a certain society, in a certain race, or in a certain circumstances. As I said, these worldly problems, if they are looked upon only from the worldly angle, we are not going to get a permanent solution. If we are in search of a permanent solution, we should remember all these worldly problems of duty and whatever it is. The duty is taking different forms in different societies and races. How do we resolve it? We can resolve it by understanding, by keeping that supreme duty in front of us. What is the supreme duty as a human being? The supreme duty, the main purpose of being born in the human body is to attain self knowledge and freedom. Now it becomes easy for us to understand what should I do in a certain situation, in a certain society. When you have this ultimate goal in front of you, whatever I do, it should be something which should be leading me towards that ultimate reality, that ultimate duty I have to do. When we keep that in front of us, automatically the details of how you are going to perform your duty in a certain situation is worked out. Without that ultimate ideal being placed before us, the human being is bound to be confused in which direction should he go and act.
Okay, thank you, Maharaj. We have two more questions that just came up. Nilanjan Mitra asks, isn't attachment among Jiva an expression of love of Chaitanya at a very minute scale? Is attachment to be called as premavasa?
See, what happens at the Jiva, at the plane of Jiva, it is attachment. But it appears to be love. But actually speaking, it is attachment. Because, again, I said the main criteria which I had pointed out earlier in my talk, what actually goes into the making of this phenomenon of attachment is there are 3-4 elements. It is only in the presence of these 3-4 elements it becomes attachment. Affection. We all have affection for certain people, certain things of the world. But if this affection is selfish, number one. Number two, if there is a sense of possessiveness on which this affection is being showered. Number three, if this affection is completely limited to one or two individuals or objects. This is attachment. I hope it makes sense and clear. And love is just the opposite of what this attachment is. All these three elements which I have spoken about will be absolutely absent in that affection which will become love. There will be no selfishness involved in that. There will be no sense of possessiveness in that. And that affection will know no limits and boundaries. It will concern the entire cosmos itself. That person is concerned with everybody, not with only one or two individuals. Our affection, which is limited to a few, that is the problem, nothing else. That is what is attachment. This very attachment, suppose, let us expand this attachment. I can put it in that way. See, presently, if I am attached, my affection is only for one person, say my child. I pour my heart's affection only on my child, my child, my child, my child. Now, if I expand this affection and slowly increase its boundaries, and slowly as I go on expanding in my affection, when the entire human race comes within the ken of my affection, that affection has turned into love. It is no more attachment. You understand? This is the thing. Love is universal. It embraces the entire creation itself. It is not limited to few things or a few human beings. Attachment is limited. It binds. It brings reactions. It is the cause of all misery and suffering in life. And love brings happiness. The true secret of happiness is love. Love which embraces this entire creation itself.
Thank you. Last question is from Dr. Ashish Tarafdar. How can one maintain non-attachment if he holds a post in his workplace?
As I said, how does that maid servant who is holding a position in the rich man's house as a maid servant, how is she non-attached? This is my answer to this person's question. That maid servant is also holding a position in that rich man's house. She is also doing certain kinds of work which is allotted to her. She has got a position. She is being paid for that. And yet, she is non-attached. Why? Because of the knowledge. Because of the knowledge that she actually belongs to some other place. She doesn't belong to here. Here she is just doing a certain kind of a role, that's all. So being in a position, now if I am in a position, I am sitting in a post, I am doing a certain role, but I know I don't belong to this place. This is only a temporary event which is happening in my life. My true abode is somewhere else. So whatever I do here, I do very easily with a sense of non-attachment, at the same time with complete involvement. Remember this point. Non-attachment doesn't mean negligence or lack of involvement. Non-attached person will be completely involved, but that involvement will not be limited to one or two persons. It is the involvement with the whole. That is the secret of non-attachment. So to be in a position and to be non-attached, the way is to understand where is that true place to which we belong. If that is there in the back of the mind, you may be in a position, and yet you may be running a great kingdom, and yet you are completely unattached. One example which comes to my mind is Janaka Videha. Actually, I wanted to tell that story. I shall tell only if time permits. If you give me the permission, I will tell you the story. Otherwise, we can stop it here. I know it's already late. But if you have time, patience to hear 5 more minutes, I can tell that story.
Please Please, Maharaj, do tell the story.
Okay. See, the story is of Janaka Videha. This Janaka was a great king, and his adjective is Videha. Videha means one who has got a body and yet he is not in the body. Videha. Deha means this body. So one who is having a body and yet he is not identified with the body. So Janaka is described as Videha. What a beautiful thing. Now see, this Janaka was a person who was the king of an entire big empire. So once what happens uh, in his empire, he was being tested actually, whether this person has got real knowledge or not. The Janaka was one of the great Brahmagyanis of those times. The person who is completely non-attached. Look what happens. Once what happened, his great empire is engulfed in fire. There is a fire all around, and this person is sitting on the throne. Just imagine. It is his empire. Usually, if you and I, if we hold a position, we are strongly attached to what we possess. We would be seriously disturbed and totally shaken if something goes wrong with our possessions. This is a fact of life. Because we have that strong sense of I and mine, and this mine is based upon attachment. But this Janaka, who was the Raja, the king of that entire empire, when it so happened that the empire was engulfed with fire, and Janaka sitting on that throne, he says, Mithilayam pradagdhayam name daihyati kaschana. In Sanskrit, that is a beautiful thing. I'm not going into the details of the story. Janaka says, Mithilayam, he is the king of Mithila. He says, Mithilayam pradagdhayam. Let this whole Mithila be engulfed in fire. Name daihyati kaschana. Nothing happens to me. Now see, the person who is holding such a great position and yet he is absolutely non-attached. And when he is working for his kingdom, he is fully involved. So we should not misunderstand non-attachment to be callousness or negligence or non-interest in what we are doing. No. Deep interest, deep involvement, but not with a particular, but involvement with the whole. That is non-attachment. So somebody being in a position doesn't matter. But one knows that one belongs to a different place. That is our Atman. And yet he is deeply involved in the position which he is holding. That is the secret.